With all the NASCAR appeals for points and penalties and cash, and a lot of drama unfolded because of that with Denny Hamlin. His entire fine and points penalty was upheld. We saw the big news with Hendrick. All their points were reallocated, and the monetary fine was still put in place. So the big points penalty that was really affecting the scenario for the playoffs, all that went back. Basically, then they got hit with what happened last week after the top two finishers with Larson and Barry. The other two Hendrick cars got taken back with Bowman and Byron, and they were assessed penalties for, what was the penalty there, Jeremy?
Greenhouse violation or something like that.
First time I've heard that.
Yeah,
First time I heard that. So to me, it kind of raised the old antennas and kind of got me thinking it might be a little bit of a conspiracy going on against Team Hendrick to kind of get those points back that got erased. What were your thoughts on some of that?
Well, from the outside, optically, I think it definitely looks that way. NASCAR they made statements that they were not happy with the ruling. They've changed the rules now to better suit what they'd like to see, even if things get changed during the appeals process and by the panel that makes those changes. They're not allowed to just completely remove the money or the points. There has to be some sort of penalty there. They can reduce it. They have a little window to work within. So they were obviously not happy, and it definitely seemed like they were out for blood for that second time. I mean, they didn't call it on Barry or Larson, and they do look at those cars after the race since they finished first and second. Didn't get caught there, but Byron and Bowman's cars get caught in R&D. Definitely seems like they were nitpicking a little bit, and obviously without knowing, and it's not like we're not necessarily doing our due diligence. It's like a lot of people in the NASCAR industry have no idea what's really going on in these appeals. Denny Hamlin kind of shed a little bit of light on his, but that doesn't tell us anything about what happened in the first Hendrick appeal that got their points back, and then what happened a week later for Colleague, where they had their points reduced, but they still had a 75-point penalty, 75-point pentalty. And did they have their money taken down, or are they still at 100?
I believe it was all still withheld or still held up and stood.
Besides the
on
points,
the financial part, yep.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, it sounds like from even insiders in the sport, it sounded like they were in a very similar situation as the Hendrick guys were, but they still get hit with a pretty hefty fine. Different panel of people, so there can be differences there. But Hendrick had all four cars basically in that were fined, and they get all those points back. And then Colleague had one out of two louvers that was the issue, and they're still hit pretty hard. This shouldn't factor in, but the fact is Colleague is still a young team. They are still trying to get good traction in the sport, and that's going to be a massive penalty for them. Not saying that it's not a massive penalty for Hendrick. I know a lot of these race teams, they run a very tight profit margin, and sometimes they don't even make profit at the end of the year. So, $400,000 for the organization to pay these fines for the four cars, that's definitely a blow, but they're going to be able to absorb that probably a little bit better than Colleague can. So the inconsistencies for me, without having good clarification on either side, really kind of left a sour taste in my mouth of this whole week. It's like, it just seems like crap. And then the Denny Hamlin thing, I honestly don't even really know what to think about it. It honestly just kind of seems dumb. If NASCAR wants to do it, I guess that's their prerogative. It's their sport, but I've been watching races for a long time, and there'd be people who would literally get out of the car and be like, yeah, I wrecked them, and nothing would happen to them. And then we got a guy going on his own personal podcast a day later and kind of fluffing up the story a little bit and saying, you let go of the wheel and wrecked him, but still getting that penalty. I don't know. To me, it's just one of those things. Like, I don't know why NASCAR even stepped in at that point. If they really had a problem with that, contact Denny and just say, hey, look, next time we will, we don't want this to be part of the sport or whatever. We will penalize you next time. But to me, this one just seems like I don't like how it looks optically, personally. How about you?
Well, I think NASCAR's been pretty consistent in the way that they handled the penalties with, hey, the modifications on the race cars, all of that. They were consistent in the way that they handled that. The appeals portion of this allowed for a panel of folks to hear the appeal and then adjust accordingly, and that's where things got iffy in that scenario. But in regards to the Denny question, NASCAR's kind of shooting themselves in the foot on this one, in my opinion, because you want your drivers to be entertaining. You want your drivers to have some sort of rivalries, because that's what I see on every single marketing thing that has ever been put out.
They still are showing fights from back in the day.
And to me, that's the product that they've kind of put themselves into over all of these years. And then to basically send a cease and desist order to every single driver that they can't really voice what is taking place on the racetrack in kind of a situation where they feel like they might get fined or points deducted and things like that. That's a big factor that I don't know if NASCAR intentionally really went to open that can of worms, but that's kind of the way the drivers are taking it. And it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens after the Larson and Priest drama. Does anything come out of that? We'll kind of see how NASCAR starts policing some of this, if it changes since this Denny Hamlin drama.
Well, Ryan Priest doesn't have a podcast that I'm aware of, so I think he's probably in the clear on that one. And Larson doesn't have one either, so probably no penalties from that one. But you're right, it's kind of a dangerous slope, because are they going to start getting in there and refereeing? And if they're not, then why are they doing it when the race is over? The results already happened. They didn't give Ross Chastain more places. They didn't give him points because of it. They only took away from Denny. And, he already had a bad finish. He took himself out and made it worse on himself than even Ross got it. So I don't know. To me, it's one of those things where NASCAR, I think they're trying to do a little too much, but they're almost talking out of two sides of their mouths. Boys, have at it. Oh, not that way. Well, what do you want? Either you kind of make the rules a little bit clearer for everyone, or you let the boys have at it. And even the drivers, when they're kind of asked about it, they don't necessarily want NASCAR coming in and making these judgment calls, especially in the middle of the race when they may not know everything. So I do not really understand what NASCAR had to gain by penalizing Denny Hamlin. I can understand where they came from with the Hendrick and Colleague, and if anything else comes out of future incidents with cars being modified in certain ways. I do think without knowing the full details, I do think the second Hendrick penalty was probably a ticky-tack penalty because of them getting off with their appeal. But they set new rules for the teams. The teams claimed that they wanted this. They wanted it to be a more fair playing field. Well, to do that, if someone is breaking those rules and the other teams aren't, that is an unfair advantage, and that is the current NASCAR. They've always had penalties and parts taken away from the past, but there was a lot more that you could do back in the day because you were still making your own parts and stuff like that. These are all manufactured by someone else, and these guys are putting them together. So I'm fine with NASCAR coming down and doing some of these penalties. I'd like there to be a little bit more transparency. Sounds like they're trying to do that. They're going to start showcasing some of these parts again like they used to back in the day.
Thanks, Dale.
Yeah, thanks, Dale. Which I don't even think he really necessarily wants that too much. But but other people do. I'm indifferent about it. I don't really care, but I think that the information should still be out there for people who do want to know.
I think, yeah, you hit a good point there, because it's so challenging for us to do our jobs and try to get into the weeds of what is taking place in the NASCAR world if we can't have any insight into it. And it's got to be frustrating for the drivers that are making these appeals, not getting any feedback so they can adjust accordingly. So hopefully these new set of rules start to apply and we get a better insight into NASCAR's mindset and some of the reactions that come out of these new processes, and it'll be fun to watch. That's certainly the case. It's added a lot of drama the past couple of weeks, that's for sure.
Yeah, it really has, and kind of for the wrong reasons, I think, mostly, but it does give you some NASCAR news during the week. I mean, it's not like other sports don't have things going on during the week, so it was kind of interesting. I mean, we even got a second episode out of Denny last week because of it, so it's content, I guess, if you will, but I think there needs to be more transparency just so there's less guessing and hypotheticals out there and just that mystery. Like, just set it straight. Appeals panel, if you're going to make a ruling, make it a public ruling. This is why we have ruled this way. Boom. Let us know. Okay, cool. It is what it is. Anyway, there's still more to play out with all this. I think Colleague is going to go back and do their final appeal, which, who knows, they may still get some of those points back. Hendrick said they're not going to do the appeal on the most recent penalty, so I guess those points deductions going to hurt. So Bowman is not in the points lead. He is down a little ways, but they're still all running really, really good, and they're going into a track that they're really, really good at. If you enjoyed that clip, then you'll love the full episode, available on all major podcasting platforms. If video is more your thing, then head to our website, losinggritpodcast.com.